Why are we so obsessed with building legacies, chasing success, and clinging to our own beliefs? Well, according to The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, it all comes down to one terrifying truth. It's all about escaping the reality of our own death and demise. This is the book that we'll be talking about today. It's an incredibly interesting book, but before we jump into that, I just wanted to say that please remember to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy my content. It helps out a ton. But enough of that, let's jump in. So this book, The Denial of Death, is written by a cultural anthropologist, an American called Ernest Becker. This is the only one of his books that I have read, but it's a winner of a Pulitzer Prize, and so it's a very well celebrated book and an incredibly interesting read. I mean, clearly it deals with a topic that I certainly find very interesting and which is relevant to all of us, namely death. And fundamentally, he believes that this fear of death is what drives us in all sorts of different ways in our lives. It is a book that gave rise to a field of study called risk management theory that you can look further into, but it's all based around this idea as well, that this fear of death is a driver for all sorts of things in our lives. I remember the first time I started thinking seriously about my own death was I was sitting on a plane. Can't remember exactly how old I was. Perhaps I was 19 years old or something like that. And I wrote down, I sat with my notebook because I was in the air for 2 hours or something, and I was like, for this plane trip, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on my own death and try to come to terms with the fact that I will die. And the way I'll do that is by sort of creating a vivid imagery of what it would look like for me to die. And sort of what will happen to my body, what will happen to my loved ones, what will it actually mean, all these things. And it turns out that it was incredibly difficult to do. I mean, there are clearly all these terrifying roadblocks that you sort of have to push through before you can sort of seriously consider it, because it's a terrifying thought to think that at some point in the future you're no longer going to be here. Clearly this is not something that we think about from the day to day, perhaps for good reason. But a lot of people probably go through life without giving it much thought at all, which might not be the wisest thing to do. And that's why a book like this can come in handy, even though you don't agree with all the arguments and points that Becker brings up. It's certainly a good idea to consider the fact that you will die one day and what that actually means today and in your life. How is that impacting your decisions and your choices in life? So Becker believed that fundamentally what we're doing all the time is distracting ourselves from the fact that we will inevitably die. And this can take a number of different expressions. It can be a dive into hedonistic pleasures to forget about the fact that we're going to die. It could be, chasing sex, drinking, drugs, whatever it may be. Or it could be distracting ourselves with trivialities and sort of elevating the importance of these trivial things which don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. If you really think about it, this is certainly something that lots of people do, and I'm also to blame for that in myself sometimes. And we're living in a very distracted culture to begin with. With our smartphones, etc. When you sit on a train, 95% of the people are sitting with their head down like this, looking at their phone, distracting themselves. And so this is clearly something that's very much an issue in our modern world. But it can also take the expression of a heroic project or an immortality project, which is something that Becker also elaborates on, which he essentially says is the healthiest way to go about denying our own death. And the Immortality Project is a undertaking that you do to sort of, what would you say, to transcend the inevitable fact of your death by engaging in something meaningful and creating something meaningful. Now, because man has this all-encompassing and all-prevailing fear of death, what he wants to do is to transcend this death. And he does this through culturally sanctioned systems, oftentimes. A good example of that could be religion. Now, he believed that human beings had a dual nature, that there was a physical world and a symbolic world, or a physical self and a symbolic self. And obviously, the physical self will come to an inevitable end, and so the emphasis should lie on the symbolic self in order to transcend this fear of death and transcend your own death, because you could say part of yourself could live on in this symbolic way in different ways, but obviously your physical body will not. One of the reasons why I really enjoyed reading this book is that it draws from a wide range of themes. It is both psychological and philosophical, and it has insights from people like Otto Rank, perhaps particularly, also Freud, Kierkegaard, Martin Buber, and many more. And yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons why I enjoyed reading this book. He talks quite a bit about psychology, and he sort of draws a parallel between his theory of this all-encompassing fear of death and how that drives us, and how that relates to, for instance, depression, where he might say something like people that are depressed are someone that feels that their immortality project is failing. And someone that's schizophrenic might be someone that's completely obsessed with their immortality project. And this denial of death is not unhealthy. I mean, it's something that is a necessary functioning or mechanism to function in the world, rather. But then there are different ways of, optimizing this functioning and your well-being in the world. And that would be through engaging in a meaningful immortality project. Now, interesting things he talks about is the failing of religion in our age of reason to provide a framework for alleviating some of this death anxiety. And so then the question is, what is going to replace that? And it is certainly a fact that people nowadays are much more anxiety-ridden, and there's a lot of depression running around. So what are some of my takeaways from reading this book? And why should you even bother reading such a heavy topic book? Well, I think the first thing is that you can turn this fear that you have of death around, which instead of repressing the fact that you're going to die, you can try and use that as fuel to live a more active and engaging life. I think this is a very stoic idea, which is sort of remember that you will die, which I think can imbue the present moment with more significance, instead of being something that's terrifying or negative. The second thing is that we are all engaging in these immortality projects, whether it's identifying with our nation, whether it's having children, or working on something, whatever it may be, your job, etc. The thing that we can do is actively choosing our immortality projects wisely, and not, not distracting ourselves with trivial things or engaging in destructive behavior, but instead try and choose things that imbues your life with meaning, and that can serve as a bulwark against this terrifying fact that we are going to die. And so I said those are the two main things that I took away from the book, that I should like to pass on to you. It's a really interesting book. I highly recommend that you give it a read. It has to do with an incredibly important topic, that of death. And so if that is something that interests you, even though it can be a little bit terrifying, I think that it's a highly beneficial read, and it is certainly something that will make you think twice about a lot of different things. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know down below, and please subscribe, leave a like, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in my next video.